Hey, greetings from the year 3000. It still sucks. This is Philip J. Fry, and you're listening to the Drunken Turkey Show, your one-stop for this sort of thing. Hit that button, like and subscribe. You know what to do, just like every other podcast.
And just like every other podcast. Welcome back to the Drunk Turkey Show. I'm Daniel. Today we have a special guest. We're going to be talking with Steve from True Crime Web. He is a former CSI investigator who has done a lot of work in cold cases and in current cases that are going on to test certain things to determine, what to actually expect during, court and stuff like that. Welcome to the show, Steve. Welcome back.
Thank you. It's an honor. Appreciate you having me, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It seems like everybody enjoys when we have you on and we get into our conversations, and I appreciate you coming back. So today you did a couple of tests when we were talking about, the latent footprint, and I'm going to bring up the affidavit real quick, and we're going to read this part. It says, during the processing of the crime scene, investigators found a latent shoe print. This was located during the second processing of the crime scene by ISP forensic team by first using presumptive blood test and then immunoblack. And so this was found during the second processing. What do you think that scene looked like as far as shoe prints if it took the second time to find it?
Well, there's a lot of things going on at a crime scene that when you go in there, of course, investigators go in and you first do you analyze the scene with just your eyes. And as human nature is, your eyes are drawn to certain locations. And typically it's something that is shocking, overwhelming to the senses. And if there's a lot of blood spatter, stains, victims, there's a lot of processing to occur, you're drawn to that. And you may overlook certain things that the background will cause a latent or hidden effect of where you wouldn't notice it, that it's separated from where all the other blood pattern analysis that you're looking at. And it's nothing that doesn't occur on a pretty well regular basis. It happens all the time that you may not get to a certain area to process it, and you'll miss it. And then it turns out that it's the golden egg, or it's something that is extremely important to the case, which this has that potential.
I agree. But do you think that there was, so this is just, it says here they found one latent shoe print. That doesn't mean that that's the only shoe print they found, right? This is just the one that they're referencing for their narrative in the probable cause affidavit, which is to corroborate what Dylan Mortenson said as far as when and where and what direction the suspect was leaving. Do you suspect that they found more than just this one footprint?
Yes, and the question you posed for me for the testing for this exact reason is very revealing, and it shows after stepping into a passive blood pool or synthetic blood pool, is what I created, that you will have, anytime you're stepping in where there's large either blood pattern analysis from cast off passive pools, any of that there will be some type of transfer as you walk through certain droplets or certain patterns. And as you walk into uncontaminated areas, you're going to have transfers.
Mm-hmm.
And that transfer can be from the size of a single drop to the size of your full shoe if you stepped in a large enough or stepped in enough areas that are contaminated with some type of blood patterns, that you would have a reasonable expectation to be able to identify that shoe pattern.
Yeah, but the fact that it was latent, that means it was probably one of the later footprints,
yes,
right? That he would have applied.
Because when the shoe is fully saturated, and at the start of these footprints, you would see the full transfers, and some of those full transfers are unreadable. Mm-hmm. But as you go, it's just like when you have a heavily inked finger and you're doing fingerprints and you're trying to get a good fingerprint card. There's going to be a point that everything is absolutely, the transfer rate is crystal clear, and you have the right amount of liquid and you have the right amount of, or the surface is receptive to that amount, and it will leave a perfect print that might be visible, but it also would leave prints that are visible when you process them with some type of chemical, such as amido black or luminol. The testing we did was luminol because that's my preference, but I set up a stage, as you'll see here.
So I just think that, kind of just to take a step back there, that one, there was probably more than just this one footprint. This footprint was in the probable cause affidavit solely to corroborate Dylan Mortenson's story. And the fact that it was a latent footprint leads investigators to believe it was one of the last footprints left. And since it was going towards the sliding glass door, that's an indication that it was on his way out. So it's just corroborating evidence. I think the mistake there is everybody's thinking that they only found one shoe print. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yes. And there's probably a lot of them that are identifiable, that the prints just in front of this one, if they processed it, doesn't mean that it hadn't or wasn't destroyed or contaminated or stepped on. And finding a fingerprint or a shoe print where people have been walking and we don't know what where the shoe print was left, the exact coloration of that flooring that was evidently causing it to be latent.
Oh yeah, that's right too. I mean, the flooring, from what I understand, from what it looks like, it looked like that wood plank, faux plank wood type of material. I think that would probably absorb a lot of the liquid. Now, this is a video that we're going to show real quick. If you want to kind of explain what we're seeing.
Yes, I was doing a couple of tests, but the question posed was if someone stepped into a passive pool, and my passive pool was synthetic blood, and then step out and you start walking. As you see, my shoes that I used were covered with booties. We'll be getting into that in a few minutes. But then I just walked in this circle, continuously stepping, and you'll see a gradual transformation of the shoes being blotched and unidentifiable. But the further I walk, and the shoes had booties on them, that you're starting to see the clear distinction and characteristics of that shoe. And like I said, I walked for 15 minutes in this continuous circle. I took a couple of breaks and just stood like these right here were the 5-minute stop. And I went there and stood for a moment, trying to recreate everything that may have occurred at the crime scene during a very short window of contact and conflict. And I know we have a window of, I think it's like 14 or 15 minutes that he would have been in the residence. Yeah. And so I was trying to replicate that through all the violence and the loss of body fluids and the possibilities of stepping in certain types of blood, that to recreate it and stepping back on where you may have already stepped prior with saturated shoes. And that's what this test was, to simulate and try to see if you could identify clearly these shoes while wearing booties. And it was pretty interesting because the booties were on the whole time that this test occurred. And you'll see that at a certain point that you don't have that botched, what you would expect of having a glove on, almost like a glove that, well, you wouldn't be able to see the fingerprints.
Right.
And I thought that would probably be the same or true with the booties, but that's not the case. After a certain amount of transfers, the booties are almost like they're not even there. And
wow.
And it was absolutely amazing to see.
Wow, that's interesting. We talked about it before. I told you I was expecting to see some distorted images, and that's really not what we see. So this is the first picture of your experiment that you had sent over. This is the prep work, I believe.
Yes, I simulated that you can put booties on shoes. Say that you're going to do or go to commit a crime, and you can, you already have your dress out kit of whatever you're going to do when you get to a certain area prepping. It's quite common for some criminals, especially bank robbers and things, that they'll have a safe ground that they'll go to, and they'll change into whatever type of controls so that they won't transfer fingerprints, body or whatever, just not for homicides, but for bank robbers would do that. And they'll have a safe ground where they'll go dress out for the crime, and then they'll go back to that safe ground to or disrobe all their clothing, for the fact that if you leave your residence, such as possibly might have occurred in this crime, dressed in a certain manner, if you're seen later and your neighbors or a camera outside your residence shows that, oh, you're in the exact same wear as the offender, that can create huge issues. And so a lot of times criminals prep.
Yeah. And I would have thought that, given the amount of planning that is alleged to have been done in this case, that, wearing something different after the crime was committed was probably high on that list. And just in case there was some footage or a witness that was left behind and that saw somebody dressed in all dark, maybe he put on a white shirt and some gray sweats, jumped in the car, something that's real easy to put on. That's one way to alleviate, the evidence if you put it in a plastic bag. And I mean, there's a chance you're going to still transfer some. He had 7 weeks to clean out his car. So this bag back here, that is the pool?
Yeah, it's just a bag. Like I said, that's synthetic blood I used. It has the same reaction when treated with luminol as what blood would have. Back when I was taking my training for CSI, we actually used real animal blood. But now that's not the case. You can get the synthetic blood and work, and it has the same luminol effect, and as far as giving the same results.
That's interesting. So these are I'm assuming a mock-up of the booties on the shoes.
Yep. All I did was take a pair of my shoes, put the booties on, and set them to the side and prep for the case to show not only that how easy it is to just slip them on your feet, but also to have you a kit ready to, if you was trying to hide or distort or keep your shoes or DNA away from the scene, because your home environment is on the bottom of your shoes. When you go to another crime scene, where you left from your vehicle, from your wherever you go, from your work environment, you carry that. That's Lacard's principle. Every time you go in an environment, you take something you leave with from every environment you're in. And the shoes are that. And so this would be a way that you may attempt to limit your home environment from a crime scene.
Interesting.
And that's what it looks like, or your booties are, that if you put these on in a semi-clean environment that's not exposed to your normal home or to your vehicle, that if you put them on, like I said, it would limit certain transfers.
Now, you're saying, so the purpose of this as well is to limit the possibility of transferring anything that you have of yourself on your shoes on the crime scene.
Your cat hair, dog hair, whatever is in your home. I mean, there's a lot of different, if you have certain jobs or work that you may have on your floor that you haven't swept up, that links you to your jobs. I mean, there's a lot of reasons that this type of activity could be pre-planned and set up so that he would limit his that cross, or the Lacard's principle of identifying him from his home.
Gotcha. So this is I'm assuming the prep before.
Yeah, this is the pre or the setup, so that I had two sections I was going to do and walk around so that I could show you the from the moment that the saturation of stepping into the passive pool with those shoes and just walking in a counterclockwise circle for the first. I think I walked the first time for right at 5 minutes. Then I stopped and stood for a minute. Then I started walking again for the next 6 or 7 minutes, and I stopped again for a minute, and then finished out my 15-minute walk, and then transitioned to the clean board, which is straight away from you. But by that time, that 15 minutes, it had gotten to the point that there wasn't any transfers.
So 15 minutes and no transfers after that. Interesting. So this is after the test, I believe?
Yes. And like I said, as when you watch the video, you'll see the heavy, or you'll see certain images that are heavily saturated, unidentifiable, and then you start seeing where they become more identifiable and fainter. And then some of those faint ones, as we go through the slideshow, you'll see that when I treated them with luminol, while you may not see a footprint, it's there. And I have an example of that.
So this is the next one. See, this is what I would have thought we would have seen with booties, the top one completely.
And you do see it for about the first 30 feet, but then it goes away.
30 feet. Huh. Now this house wasn't very big. So I wonder if, I'm pretty sure they had other ones. Now, do you think that they could tell the size of the shoe?
If I just didn't put the rule in here with this, but yes, you would be able to, even with the saturated one, the one that's heavily saturated up there, you can see where the pointed shoe cover goes out. It has a little unnatural curvature that you wouldn't expect on a shoe, which would be an indicator that this individual is wearing booties. You see, if you went up on the top one, in front of the toe area,
this part,
that little rectangle square area, that's the part of the booty that extends past my normal shoe print.
Interesting. So they're going to know how much, if they see this in the shoe prints, then they know that the person went to extensive planning.
Yes, that would be a clue that, this guy is possibly wearing booties, because what would cause an extension of your shoe out past what the normal shoe line is?
Right.
It's either something that you picked up litter at the crime scene, or it's going to be something such as a booty. And on behind it, you'll see these on the heel. Go to the heel, downside it. You see that little drag mark back behind the heel?
Right here.
Right there. That's from the back edge of the booty. As I was placing my foot down, it would drag and leave a tail.
This is fascinating. This is interesting. This is going to say a lot about how much planning and stuff like that. So when, they find certain things at his house, right? They find evidence of coveralls and gloves and I believe they even found booties, somewhere. I'm not sure. I saw that in the live chat. I don't know if I actually remember them saying they found booties, but had they did, this would be a lot more stronger than what most people are thinking, in my opinion.
Yes. Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, like I said, but there's telltales. You can see on my shoe example here. You see where the that we were just highlighting where the drag mark at the heel was, and you can see where they right there that was creating that tail on the back of the heel, and then up here on the front that shows you the area that was extending out off of the toe.
Interesting. Do you know if blood transferred onto the shoe itself through the booty?
It did. I have images of that.
Okay, cool.
You see that liquid shine in there?
Yeah.
With the high, that's some of the transfer that wicked through the shoe and through compression as I was walking and had stepped in the passive pool, that it penetrated that material of the shoe cover.
Interesting.
And but like I said, you wouldn't realize, with the booty there, but that's what was the pass through. But there's also a saturation on the areas that don't look like they have any transfer. It's there. You don't see it until you hit it with luminol, but I have images of that.
And so this is a picture of them.
But that's after I removed the booties. That's the whole shoe.
Interesting stuff.
And you can't really tell that there's any type of transfer on that.
No, you can't.
Other than that shine that's up at the top there on that, I think it was right shoe that I highlighted.
I got a question. So you said that at a certain point it stopped to transfer. If the shoe print was latent enough inside the house that it was no longer visible by the human eye, and this person parked, I don't know, maybe 25, 30 yards away and went through the outside, through the dirt, through possible snow, could he still transfer anything into his car?
Well, as I said, as I walked on that receptive cardboard, and it sucked up the blood the synthetic blood pretty well. But when you go out, and I recently just did a test on some tree limbs regarding the Richard Allen case crime scene. And I washed my hands in one part of the test. And those results of the transfers, even after washing the hands, were just as visible as reaction-wise saturated bloody hand. And so I would think that if there was a drying of the shoe and the blood had dried and transferred, if you put any type of liquid into it, because these chemicals react on parts per thousands and millions. I mean, it's not. And so you could resaturate that shoe, rehydrate it, where you could have more additional shoe transfers. So I think that by him stepping in certain areas, that it may have rehydrated and could possibly allow for more transfers to occur.
So then the fact that there was, according to the defense, no DNA or lack thereof DNA in the car, one would suspect that if Bryan Kohberger did commit this crime, that he probably changed out his shoes before entering the car.
Yes, I would. If you go to the extent of putting booties on, you are pretty much done your background on how to conceal and as much evidence as possible relating you to a crime scene.
Yeah, it's interesting stuff. I think we're putting a lot of things in perspective, at least for me, at least. So these are some footprints, and
yes, this footprint here, you see one. That's the heavy saturated one. That's with the booty. You can't really tell much details. Above it, if you look at the 1 o'clock position, you can just barely faintly see where there's some discoloration. That is what you would consider a latent print. You can't tell that it's a shoe print. All you see is a little bit of discoloration. There's not much there. The next image, you'll see that when you treat it with luminol, that's what you get. And so you see that it went from that heavy, oversaturated shoe print that's not identifiable to something that has great detail.
That's
the size of the shoe, the width of the shoe, everything about it, and we'd be able to identify probably the manufacturer from that, whatever type of sole patents they would have.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, this is very detailed. I mean, you can probably you definitely could figure out what model of shoe this is, the size, and this is again through the booty.
And that's through the booty. And that was surprising to me. And I appreciate you posing the question for me, because I wouldn't have expected that to occur.
I wasn't either. I was expecting at most this to the left.
Yeah, that's too. Yes, that right. I mean, you might be able to tell the shoe size and maybe manufacturer, but I don't know. It'd be close.
Yeah, it definitely would. And so this is, I guess, where you were standing at?
Yeah, that's just standing there after 5 minutes of walking. and just stand in there for a minute to see what type of transfer. And that's through booties. I had the booties on, and even after 5 minutes, there's not much evidence that there's even booties on those shoes, if any evidence that there's booties on, because all you're seeing is the natural transfer through.
Do you think that, given Bryan Kohberger's knowledge in school, and he went and studied, in DeSales University criminology, got his master's degree there. I looked at the course requisite, what he needed to graduate in that course, and forensics is one of them. Do you think he would have known that his shoe print was going to go through?
No. Like I said, I don't. I don't know if there's any videos out there or anything. I think you may have posed a question that a lot of people haven't realized, and I didn't realize it, and I've worked a lot of crime scenes. Now, there may be people out there that have, and there may be studies of it. I just am unaware of anyone with this data.
Yeah, I didn't think it was going to do this. I would have thought it would have been a little bit more difficult to see. He did wear, or according to the probable cause affidavit, it indicates that whoever left the shoe print was wearing Vans, or similar to Vans sole shoes, which are very common, especially in college. So amongst college-aged persons. So I would think that was probably one of the reasons why he decided for that shoe. But yeah, this is interesting.
At a certain point, now this is the actual shoe itself. This isn't a transfer. This is the bottom of my shoes after I removed the booties. And this is what went. So what you saw of the high shine up in the very top, if you go all the way up, that high shine at the very top, those areas is what you saw in the other. The transfer, the luminol reaction is what you see here on the actual shoe itself. That if they had his shoes, whoever the offender is, even if he had booties on, this is what you would expect to see.
Interesting. This definitely tells me if Bryan Kohberger did commit this crime, that he definitely took off his shoes before entering that vehicle. And as you mentioned, if he planned this as meticulously as we think that he allegedly has, then that would have probably been something he would have considered prior to committing the crime.
But like I said, it's all this here, the first 12, 15 feet, these boards, each of these placards are probably close to 30, 32 inches. And so I didn't actually measure out what the circle was or the circuit as I walked it. From the first one to the next time, you'll see that they clear up just, I said, after 5 minutes.
That's interesting.
But it was a very interesting test, and it has surprising results for me.
Yeah, I was not expecting it to be like this as well. Now, we'd spoken before, and I'd asked you this, and you'd answered it for me, but I think it'd be great to answer it for everyone, is that there was a theory or thought that maybe perhaps, a single blood drop may have fell from himself or the knife in front of Dylan's bedroom, and maybe perhaps he stepped on it, revealing maybe the shoe pattern at the very least. But do you think that that's possible?
A single drop, if it falls, if it's a passive drop and just drops to the floor, when it hits the floor, it's going to be somewhere about the size of a nickel, maybe a quarter, but generally about the size of a nickel. And so if you stepped in that single drop, you're only going to get a transfer matching the size of that drop.
Yeah, you're right. Extreme asks, is in your opinion that he did not wear booties based on your experiment? Well, I'm not sure we can tell that.
If he's going to go ahead and buy all new shoes, and he knows that this is pre-planned, you're highly organized, you thought it out, you've done your research, and you're going to go do this crime, that whatever triggered him to make it this night, if he's going to throw everything away, probably not. Mrs. Steve and I did a test without booties, whereas she walked a circuit and she was still doing transfers, latent transfers out to around 140 feet, I think, where you could still identify the shoe print. You couldn't really see the shoe print on these placards, but it was 120 to 140 feet away that there were still transfers from when Mrs. Steve was assisting me on a test that we did prior to this, regarding this case, actually.
Interesting. So the booties will wear off faster. The shoe prints with the booties wear off quicker.
Yeah, like I said, with 15 minutes. Now, Mrs. Steve and I don't know if there's really a difference in it. I would think that the booties probably would allow, due to the layer of a material that absorbed the synthetic blood in this case, that it would allow it to even go further. But Mrs. Steve was just wearing shoes with no booties or shoe covers on them. And it was still, like I said, 120 to 140 feet. So both of them, we know, will go for a long distance. So it doesn't really matter if he prepped himself or he didn't. There are probably 100 shoe prints in that house. Law enforcement picked one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when court gets here, I'm sure that the crime scene techs have pictures of hundreds of shoe prints or transfers
Mm-hmm.
or partials. We just don't know. People are saying, well, there's only one shoe print. That's impossible.
Yeah, I don't think that there's just one. The only reason they're saying there's just one, in my opinion, has more to do with the fact that they're just speaking about that one. Its location, it's right in front of Dylan's door, the direction that it's facing, it corroborates her information. It doesn't say that there's only one, which Twisted Stick asked the question, why was there only one latent shoe print and why was it by Dylan's door away from both rooms?
They used it for supporting evidence that, yes, she came face to face with the offender.
Exactly. It doesn't say that there was only one shoe print. It just says that they found a latent shoe print in this location facing this direction, corroborating this victim's statement. But my thing is, so from what I understand is the two victims that were first attacked were in the third floor on a bed. I'm assuming he attacked on top of them. I don't see him standing in a pool of blood in that scenario. And in the Xana's room on the second floor, according to the probable cause affidavit, at least one person's on the floor, which is Xana. And so I would have thought the likelihood is that that shoe print was made after the crimes have been committed. And for it to be latent within that amount of time, from that area to right in front of Dylan's door, what does that tell you?
Well, we don't know how much movement is in each room. We don't know how cleaned, if we step into a passive pool and then you step on something that's super absorbent, such as clothing, something that will take off a lot of the saturation, that there's a high transfer. My transfers was something that you wouldn't expect to soak up a lot of blood. But if you were in an area that had carpet, or you may be able to cut, whereas you don't have to walk 40 feet to get that transfer that's latent. That if you had something that absorbed a lot of the blood, because we may have a shoe that's right beside it that was oversaturated that they couldn't identify, but when they processed it, they found this one that was. So there's so many variables to this and there's no way to cover all the data unless you process the scene yourself. You're there, you're analyzing it, and you're trying to make sense of this.
Right. Yeah, no, makes sense. I mean, the other thing I could think of is maybe perhaps he did step in a pool of blood while wearing booties at the time, maybe took it off, and that's why it got latent so quick. But without seeing the scene, we have no idea,
We don't know. He could have been, he stepped on the bed clothing, stepped on them. I mean, there's so many different ways that could have caused the oversaturation not to be an oversaturation.
That's true. If one of the victims was on the bed, I think there's been some speculation whether Ethan was on the ground or if he was on the bed. He could have very well have stepped on the bed with blood on his shoes, which, like you mentioned,
or it could have been from a passive pool from the first victims up top, and then and that's on the way out. I mean, like I said, law enforcement knows far more than we'll ever, until trial gets here.
Yeah, 100%. Squash asks, would the print show if the blood was dried to the sole?
There was a drying process that at a certain point that it quit for my testing. And after 15 minutes, it got to the point that no, the transfers in my environment, even when I treated them with luminol, did not occur, which is interesting that within that window that there is a 15-minute, I don't know exactly what point. It's somewhere between 12 and 15 minutes that the transfers quit occurring. I just don't know at what point that was.
Interesting. Do you think that the public will see any of the pictures of the crime scene, excluding the bodies, of course? Do you think that those are things that will be public record or be shown in trial that will be viewable for the public?
Oh, I expect, yes. The stuff like the transfers, the shoe prints that's in the probable cause. Yes, I think some of this, you may see cast off of where they're explaining how the attack occurred, because there's so much in blood pattern analysis that you can tell where the victim is, you can tell where the offender is, you can tell if he's right-handed, left-handed, you can tell if the victim is fighting and creating their own cast-off from defensive wounds. There's so much that you can tell from the crime scene analysis of the victim's injuries, of receiving the injury. What's the first thing that when we get hurt, we grab it with our hands? If you sprain your ankle, you grab your ankle. Mm-hmm. If you get injured somewhere, you grab it, and that happens in the violent encounters also. And so you can have that once you may grab an injury, then you can have your own cast off patterns that are part of it. And not only does the cast off go into the room in the environment on the walls, doors, but it also goes onto the appendix.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I think that's the reason why a lot of people expected there to be a treasure trove of DNA in this car, and a lot of people were shocked when they didn't find it.
I was.
Yeah, yeah, me too. I was as well. I thought that they were gonna find it pretty easily. I expected there to be some, somewhere on the brake pedal, on the carpet, on one of the carpet fibers, something like that. And according to the defense, there's a total lack of it. Yeah, I agree with you. I think that well, one, this is pretty, in my opinion, damning that how close or how clear of a footprint they probably got. And I mean, if they comes back, Kohberger apparently was wearing size 13 shoes. I know that when they picked up his shoes from, I think, his arrest there in Pennsylvania, they made sure to emphasize the size of his shoe. And I think that that's probably a reason why.
Well, these shoes are, I don't know, it depends on which manufacturer's shoes I have. Those are either 13s I wear or 13 and a half.
It's more eye-opening, in my opinion, especially the results of this test as far as the clarity of the shoe print, the extensiveness of it, how far you can see it. Go back to that last
picture there. Even in this one, if you go to the word where you can see the clear image,
yeah,
go to the toe, you still see that there's something there. That even on that you can see out past the normal toe, that the booty still left an impression.
Yeah, you're right. It makes it look odd.
But even on the one when it started showing the detail within, go to the heel, see if there's a tail back there. Because like I said, when I created this for you, no, you can't really see.
Yeah, that one's kind of hard to tell. You know what?
But on that print, also you see where the shoe itself does cast off.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I saw that. I was wondering if you can see the booty effect on the shoe, on the aluminum.
Blow it up there. I can't. No, it doesn't really show it. You see that other up in front of it, but I don't know if that's from the booty or if that's from a double impression.
Got you. Yeah. Yeah, and I can't see the back part.
I walked in this area numerous times, and so those others could be other transfers. But you see those long lines, that's blood spatter, that as I moved my foot forward and with saturation, that when my foot stopped, the blood continued under force and created those long lines, meaning that the angle was very shallow.
How much blood did you step in, or synthetic blood? Did you measure the amount?
If you go back up there, you'll see that there's probably, in that first picture, that's all I stepped in. That's probably less than maybe a fourth of a cup.
Oh, wow. So this would be something you would expect to see from a stabbing victim underneath their body, this amount of blood.
Yes, this is something that could accumulate in seconds.
Oh, wow.
It depends on type of injury.
Interesting. Yeah, that was one thing I was wondering too. Like, how long would he have had to have stepped in the blood for it to, if that makes a difference?
Well, I mean, if we're having a fight, if you have hand injuries, you don't even have to step in the blood. I mean, if you have defensive wounds and you catch somebody's shoe, you can have transfer from an active injury that they're fighting you off, and if you're kicking them or something, they grab your shoe, you can have an equal amount of transfer from that, just as much as from a blood pool. You don't have to step in the blood itself. During fights, I've been in a lot of them, and I've been kicked, and you could tell from my uniform that where people kick me from my from my shoulders to my ankles. You'll have full shoe impressions of dirt transfers and mud in those encounters, and so. But you can always get transfers directly from injuries. It doesn't always have to be passive pools.
Interesting. Can they take particles from where they think the car was parked and match it up to the undercarriage of his car or tires, or even though it was weeks afterwards? What are your thoughts on possible particles from the scene, or the street, gravel, stuff like that? Could that implicate him to the actual scene?
Well, now they were out and they processed some acceleration, and so you'll have those compounds. Tire compounds are very unique to a vehicle in a specific time frame, if I recall correctly. Whereas if his car was recovered within a certain amount of time, because tire compounds change as they go from environment to environment. But if they were analyzed within a certain time, that they may be able to identify that car exactly, that these are the compounds exist with his vehicle plus what was left at the scene. And it could even happen where he parked at. Sometimes just the turning of a steering wheel will cause a transferal of materials from the tire to the pavement area. How often do we crank up a car and turn the wheels without moving, and it creates that shedding of rubber material? Yeah,
that makes sense. I don't think they'd be able to, find it off of his vehicle because he drove all the way to Pennsylvania, and they didn't, get his vehicle until the end of December. But if they went to his apartment complex and saw if maybe perhaps he had a specific parking spot that he was designated to, I think that if they can find that, they probably could match it. That's interesting. I didn't know that.
Well, not only that, but now it doesn't matter. Now he may have collected new compounds from the transition, but you would still have a base amount of rubber material that may be unique to the same set of tires that he has. They might not be able to say, oh, it's an exact match, but they could say that, oh, these tires are of this manufacturer, and this is what is on Kohberger's car.
Extreme Blonde asks, interested to know your thoughts on what appears to be blood running down the outside of the back wall. Does it appear to you to be blood when you look at that? And if so, what does that tell you about the crime scene? I'll see if I can find that picture.
It has the consistency and color, and until I had some other explanation, something in that house matching that I can see why everyone would think it is.
Yeah, I thought it looked similar to blood. It looked like the consistency of blood. To me, that tells me that somebody was probably up against the back wall there.
Yeah, well, at least their injury, whichever injury that they sustained, was enough to allow a large quantity of blood to leave, because it takes to create that stain is not something that you would expect from anything other than a major injury and a lot of loss.
Yeah.
Now, if there's a passive pool, and they would have to more than likely be a passive pool in the room directly above that for this to occur.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking as well. Let me see if I can zoom in. This is as close as I can get. It looks over like it's going over this pipe, and then coming back down, pulling, and then coming this way over to the side.
And like you said, this is, if you go up to the right there, you see where it comes down, and then it creates a secondary passive pool.
Yeah.
And then from that passive pool, wherever it gets to a certain point, it overcomes the edges, gravity does its thing, and each of these are consistent in size, meaning that all the fluids have the same viscosity of what this is, because they're all almost identical in width. Whatever the substance is, it's all the same substance. And above that, there's probably another passive pool above what you see, that singular, which created that secondary passive pool.
But this tells me that this scene wasn't very clean. You know, a lot of people thought that maybe perhaps if you didn't get shoe prints all over the place, it was a cleaned area. You know, to have this amount of blood to be dripping out the back, it tells me that there is probably nowhere near that. Can a lay person use luminol without destroying a crime scene? Also, how much would it cost to send in clothing to be DNA tested? This would be clothes from the 1980s.
You can order it, I think, from the companies that I use. There's certain forms you have to fill out, and it can't be shipped out of country on some of these chemicals. So, yes, Searchy and these other places do. My DNA test that I sent off last year ranged from anywhere from, on a single test, from $3,800 to $1,800, just depended on what type of testing I was requesting for a specific DNA. So different labs and different types of tests have different price costs.
So since it was a print still and not a smear, does that mean that it was not cleaned up? Like, yes, if somebody tried to mop it, it wouldn't be there, right?
Well, there is that possibility that stains that even if you mopped it up, if it was dried and saturated, that it could still be there. So,
would there be any evidence of the mop going through it, like some sort of smears or anything?
Well, no. I mean, like I said, they find it. You see that pattern, but there is that possibility that if it was a dried stain and it was cleaned up, that it could still possibly exist. But I don't know.
Well, you said that it activates with water, right? Like it can reactivate with hydration.
Yeah.
So if somebody put water in it and it mixed with water.
You wouldn't expect it to be crisp, but there's a possibility that it could. I mean, there's in the world of CSI, there's nothing that's impossible.
That's the truth. You know, when it comes to science, you know, there's never an absolute 100% answer.
No.
You know, I've never heard a scientist say that, at least.
Because people paint over walls, and there's blood stains, and the same stain will come through that wall, even being painted over. Yeah, because with my clothing, if you go back and you see any of my shows, that even after I wash the clothing, after it's dried, it's the same stain that even after washing that was there pre-stain or pre-washing, whereas the blood didn't enlarge the stain during the washing. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that you can have a fixed size of a stain with certain characteristics. Would it be really clear with a shoe? I couldn't tell you. I haven't conducted that, and I might actually go out and see and do that, and we'll talk about it after I get that done.
Yeah, because that's one of the theories that's out there that persons cleaned this place up, which confuses me because, you know, there are people that think that these two girls, even if they had the help of 2 or 3 other people, cleaned up this entire house. And
we know that's not true.
Yeah, no, I know. I know. But they, you know, they think that that's possible in 8 hours, but that Bryan Kohberger, who had 7 weeks, it was impossible for him to clean up his car.
I mean, why would you clean the house and leave the victims?
Exactly.
I mean, if you're going to clean the house, you're going to get the victims out of there and clean the house. It's going to be John Wick, where you go in and you remove, you package, and clean them. You can't clean the house and leave the victims there. Yeah,
no, you're absolutely right. That kind of doesn't make any sense. Not to mention that there is a ton of mess throughout the house that you can see through the windows. There's evidence of partying. There's evidence of beer pong table with a bunch of trash and stuff. Did they clean the trash and put it back so that there wasn't blood on it? It never made sense to me.
I mean, law enforcement, to clean, you have to have, just like what you see with certain cases that they say, well, there was cleaning occurred at the crime scene, and there's still there, but there's evidence of that cleaning. And if law enforcement had evidence of that cleaning, there would be other people charged for the fact that the only reason you would clean, and there's no, I mean, you can't go in and do something without there being evidence of that, especially with something that's under the microscope, such as this crime scene.
Yeah, 100%. Twizzlestick says E is supposed to be up against the door. X should be to the right of the door. No body was near this wall. You know, that was a question that I brought up to this family member. I was like, you know, I heard this, and they told me that they had heard that also, but they had also heard that somebody was leaning up against this wall.
Movement can occur that you can be in one place for a great amount of loss of blood, and then you move.
That's true.
And so could you have where there was a substantial incident of violence here, that they were there for? I mean, you know, you look at this, you may only be talking about something that's maybe a cup, maybe 2 cups of blood, you know, a pint of blood that's there, that's caused this. And then you move across the room. I mean, law enforcement knows exactly if this came from a passive pool, there'll be evidence of any movement from this area to another location. And we don't know. It may be the exact location where the bodies are. We don't know what's in the crime scene. I don't. Others may. I don't.
Also, I wanted to bring this up again just because I did also ask Christy about this. And when I spoke to Christy the first time, she had told me that Hunter Johnson had told her husband Steve at the celebration of life that Ethan was behind the door. I asked her about, because and I'll probably talk about it maybe tomorrow or Saturday or something. And there's a HBO Max show on the Idaho murders. And in that show, they discussed that one of the bodies was up against the hallway. And it's weird because they kind of make it allude like it was a 3rd floor victim, but that's impossible. But in there, they said that Ethan was on the bed. So I went and asked Christy about that. Now, Christy had told me this in the beginning. She said, I heard that from Ethan's best friend, that Ethan was behind the door. And then she also said, but I also heard that he was on the bed and somebody was in the hallway or somebody was there. So she wasn't sure. Like, police weren't really giving them information. So the information that I went with was what was said from Ethan's best friend, who supposedly called 911. I took that as probably being more reliable, so to speak, just because of where it came from.